Okay, welcome to the third video in this section. And now that I've created my two lambdas and tied them into with our route keys and API gateway, let's start testing them with some test payloads and see if we can actually send it to our static web host in S3. Now, I went ahead and I created a completely public bucket, turned it into a static website in S3 without you guys. And before you freak out and say, I didn't watch your other series, we explained how to do this, I will link a real short video that'll explain exactly how to make a completely public bucket and then turn it into a static web host. But I don't want to do that again here and repeat myself. So if you don't know how to do that, just watch that other video. But now to start utilizing everything, let's look at what this code looks like. And it's super simple for now, and I'm going to make it more difficult. The index HTML just calls the index JavaScript. And in our index JavaScript, I just have two functions. First of all, I pasted that WebSocket endpoint here from API Gateway right over here in Stages Production. I just pasted that one we just created over here into the code over here. So it can connect through API Gateway, and then through API Gateway, it can communicate through those route keys to our two Lambda functions. So again, the first thing we need to get is our connection ID. So when this web page starts up, it's going to get an event listener on connection and send that big blob of data over to API Gateway to our Lambda, which is going to be printed out and available in CloudWatch. So that's great. So that's what's going to happen first here. And then we can grab that connection ID and stick it into our second Lambda. That's the one in Python, that sendIoT message. And then we can start sending test payloads, which will be reflected in this function in our browser. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, there is one thing I have to do first because I forgot to do it. And it's not the first time I forgot to do it because it's kind of difficult to remember, is I have to add one additional permission. So the permission I need in sendIoTPayload, so I might as well do it now. So if you go to configuration, this is the easiest way to do it, permissions, and then open up my current permissions, and your current Lambda execution's default permission allow Lambda to execute itself, and it also allows logging in CloudWatch. But there's a special inline policy I want to add. You don't actually need it in every function. This one you do. It's called execute API. So as an inline function, I just type in API and there it is. I'm going to keep it real lazy. I'm just going to make it simple and say all executable APIs. This is a test account. I don't do anything for other companies in this account, so I don't worry about restricting privileges. Go over to resources and all resources, so I don't have to put individual ARN numbers in there. Go ahead and review that policy, and it's fine. I'm just going to name it execute API Lambda. Doesn't really matter. Okay, go ahead and create that policy. And now that's automatically in our Lambda function. So I can pretty much close that out and Lambda's good to go. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to that web bucket I just created, click on my index HTML object, not my JS object, because that's where it starts. And I'm going to right click my object URL. That's going to start my web page. So right click this, open this up in a new tab. Nothing's going to be reflected on here. But if you're using Chrome, it's Control-Shift-J. If you're using almost any other browser, it's Control-Shift-I. I can bring up the console. And if I go to the console tab here, there it is. That's what I'm looking for. WebSocket is connected, and that's what I put here on connection. So that means if you get this message and everything's correct, now we can go to CloudWatch and get our connection ID for that second Lambda. So let's do that. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this just so I can go to CloudWatch without closing out other connections. Okay, here we are in CloudWatch. Now, place to find your Lambda, you probably already know this, is logs, log groups, and the Lambda connection I'm looking for is that connection. To find it, I'm just going to type it in here, connection. And there it is. All right, and if everything worked, I should have one from a couple minutes ago that was just created. Sure enough, there it is. Let's go check it out, see what it looks like. Okay, here's that big blob of data that we're going to get into to extract our connection ID. So you can look at your own blob of data, and this happened when I said print event. This is the big blob that's sent back from any browser. So there's a lot of information here. The information we care about is simply the connection ID, which is right here. And I made it easy for you by digging into it and just getting it right here. So now we're going to grab this connection ID And again, I'm going to fix this so you don't have to do this manually in upcoming lectures by making a more sophisticated Lambda function. So go back here to sendIoTPayload, and this is the last variable we need to stick in here. So we stick it right in here, connection ID. And as long as we don't close out that browser, we'll maintain this specific connection ID. I think by default in WebSockets, you get it for like 2.5 hours or something like that. Go ahead and deploy that. Okay, great. Now that that's deployed, what can we do? Well, we're connected over here to our browser. We can start sending it payloads. Now, in the next lecture, I'll show you how to start sending IoT payloads, but let's go send it a couple payloads just to make sure it's working. So I gave you some code here where I can send a hard-coded test message saying hello from Lambda, hard-coded test message. Sounds familiar? If I put an IoT payload here, we can send an event payload. Now, you might say, hey, why are you using key values tied together as parameters for this function? These specific functions for WebSockets and API Gateway require key value arguments. So that's why you have to have these connection IDs equals your own variable and data equals your own variable, because that's a requirement of these APIs. So that's why I have it like this. So let's go ahead and test this. I'm going to go ahead and configure a test event. I'm just going to leave the default event here, and I'll just give this one a value, just so you know I'm not cheating. And we'll call this T1 basic. So it's just a basic test event. Now, for this hard-coded test message, it's not even going to use this. It's going to use the hard-coded message here, hello from Lambda. So let's go ahead and test it. Hopefully, we'll get a good response. Great, T1 basic executed okay. And let's go look at our web page. And sure enough, there's our hard-coded message. Okay, let's try again to make sure I'm not cheating. Let's go back over here, and let's use the IoT message. And then when we tie this to IoT Core in the next lecture and then put a real visualization website, this is going to be way cooler than what you're seeing here. And I've noticed most other videos just stop kind of here and they say, hey, here's what you can do, but they don't actually show how you can actually use it and make something cool. So I'm going to show you actually to do something really cool, like showing a high chart visualization. Okay, so now this is actually going to use the incoming event. So in the next lecture, I'm going to use a real IoT event coming from your device and that test script. But for this event, I'm just going to use that basic thing we just created. So I'll say test. And it brings in that event package from test, and I'll do it again. So you see there's two of them. So let's go back here. And yeah, see there's two of them. It only shows one, but this two means two of them came in. And if I change it, there'll be a new one. And there's that test event we just created. Awesome. So we know everything's working. So in the next and final lecture for this specific series, there's two things I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new action rule in IoT Core so we can actually push external IoT payloads into our web browser. And then the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of this little test simple web browser code and put in our high charts code so we can actually start visualizing real IoT payloads coming from your device. So that's going to be way cooler than what I just showed you here. So hold on for that in the next lecture.